and it's my pleasure to be here today to talk about an issue which is very dear to me. It's always actually very difficult to go after somebody like Jennifer Hillman, who has stolen a lot of my thunder. So, but I will change gear. But I also want to say the perspective that I will bring is a perspective as currently a panelist, and this is my third panel. So it's a perspective of somebody who has seen the system from what may be called the inside. So what I would like to explore is why have we come from a situation where a decade after the establishment of the WTO and the dispute settlement system, it was regarded as the jewel in the crown, and now there's an existential crisis. So, and I think we need to go back, as Jennifer has, to the GATT days, and just kind of, when you look at what those GATT reports were like, because of the system, the GATT panel reports, they were short, they were very targeted, they didn't touch on controversial issues, because if they did, they would never get accepted. And so highly political issues were never taken to a GATT panel. And this changed, of course, with the dispute settlement understanding, and it changed the system from a diplomatic approach to a adjudicative approach. Jennifer has already pointed out how this adjudicative approach helps countries like New Zealand. It levels the playing field. It ensures that there's an even-handedness in the approach to international rules. And New Zealand has benefited from that approach. It's also important to realize that compliance with the WTO dispute settlement system in the reports have actually been very high. But according to the WTO, about 90% compliance. So it was a system that actually worked. But obviously now it's not working. And I think in my own view, this is partly a result of the changing nature of the dispute settlement system, and particularly the appellate body. When you think back when it was first established, initially it had not been envisaged that many reports would be appealed. So, but in fact, about 60% of reports are appealed. And for that reason, there was only 7 appellate body members that were supposed to work kind of part-time. But now there's, the system is jammed up with 12 current appeals dating back to April 2018. So you've got a system which actually is jammed. Initially, the appellate body was very circumspect in its approach to decisions. So it didn't treat its prior decisions as precedents. It considered that appellate body and panels should address only those claims that must be addressed in order to resolve the dispute, and they shouldn't make law. It issued short reports. So, for example, in US gasoline, which was a very seminal case in the early days, it was 30 pages, double-spaced, no paragraph numbers. Similarly, in the US wool shirts and blouses, which dealt with the burden of proof, really, really substantive issues. Again, 20 pages, double-spaced, no paragraphs. But now the dispute settlement system has evolved over the last decade and more, and in part, this evolution is why we are looking now and thinking that the system is not working. First, the number of cases has increased, but they've become more complicated, as Jennifer indicated as well. There's some people who say that in the early days of the appellate body, it just dealt with all the easy cases. And then as time passed, the cases became more difficult. But whatever the reason, there's been a growth in the complexity and diversity of the arguments and the submissions of the parties. You only have to look at the big subsidies cases like the Boeing and the Airbus cases. So there's been a growth in the length and the complexity of the panel in the appellate body reports. So you go, for example, in the recent case of Brazil taxation, 154 pages single-spaced. In the Boeing compliance panel, 180 pages. And I've observed myself that there's an increase in what I call a kitchen sink approach, which is being adopted by counsel. So this is where parties put in all possible claims, irrespective of the strength of the claims, or whether they're necessary to resolve the dispute, with the hope that one of the arguments will stick. So this leads to another criticism, which is the tendency of panels in the appellate body to address all the claims and all the legal arguments before them, even though it's not actually necessary to resolve the dispute. You can understand why, particularly with the point of panels, that they do this, because they're worried about being overturned by the appellate body. And so if you overturn on one point, they want to make sure that there's other points there which they may not be overturned on. And so that's also the kind of approach of counsel. But it's less clear to me why the appellate body needs to take decisions on points which are not necessary to resolve the dispute. And panels also have a role as the trier of facts. And Jennifer has pointed this out, that even though the appellate body decides on matters of law, by using this objective assessment of the facts rule, which panels have to comply with, it means that the appellate body can actually delve into the facts. And there is a real issue of the extent to which the roles of the appellate body and the panels are becoming blurred. The appellate body also criticizes the panel if it doesn't inquire into and make findings on facts. So, for example, in the recent Korea radionuclides case, this is what the appellate body said. They said, while a panel cannot make the case for a party, Article 11 requires a panel to, quote, test the evidence for the parties and to seek further information if necessary in order to determine whether the evidence satisfies the party's burden of proof. So in practice, there's a very fine line between making the case for a complainant, which is not permitted, and testing evidence with the parties and a panel developing its own reason in deciding a case, which is permitted. So the issue of making factual findings has also raised another issue, which is another criticism, is that the appellate body and the dispute settlement system doesn't always actually resolve the dispute. So this happened in New Zealand in the Canada Dairy case, where the appellate body reversed a particular legal interpretation, but the panel didn't have enough facts. The appellate body didn't have enough facts on the record to be able to resolve the dispute. So the whole thing had to go back to the start again. So as a result of this lack of what's called a remand facility, panels then make additional factual findings just in case they're overturned. And so this can actually really, again, add to the complexity, add to the length and the complexity and of the panel reports, just in case they get overturned. So one of the consequences of the increased complexity of both the factual and the legal arguments has been the increase in the length of time that the appellate body in particular issues its reports. So there's supposed to be a prompt settlement, and there is a mandatory time frame set out, which almost now is always broken. If you actually look at the time frames, if you look at a panel report and then the appellate body report, forgetting about the compliance, the normal standard set out in the DSU should be about 18 to 19 months. So it's supposed to be relatively quick dispute settlement system. There was a study that between 95 and 99, the average was 23 months, and then between 2007 and 2011, it had gone up to 28 months on average. But now that's even greater than that, and the appellate body is taking 12 months in general to issue its reports in recent cases. So, I mean, there is one of the reasons for that is the lack of administrative and legal support for the appellate body and panels, but that is just only part of the issue. In addition to the being prompt, another sort of philosophy that was at the creation of the start of the DSU was that it should bring security and predictability to the multilateral trading system. And I don't think that the full potential of this is actually being realized at present. To my mind, it's not a question of just following the precedent created by the appellate body at all. And I believe that panelists do try to objectively assess the facts and the legal claims brought before them. But it's sometimes not clear to a panelist how the appellate body is going to review its findings. And so this doesn't help if it's not clear to a panelist how the appellate body is going to actually decide. It's going to not be clear to counsel how the appellate body is going to decide. And so this adds to the difficulties. So so we've seen all the problems. What are the options for reform? Well, the issues at present, as indicated by Jennifer, are largely addressed at the appellate body. And if the system doesn't, if there's no selection of panelists of appellate body, then the system will fall apart. There's two responses to that. One's positive, one's negative. Jennifer's already explained the negative aspects of it. There is a positive as well, potentially, which again, maybe I'm biased because I come as a panelist. Panels generally make robust findings, and parties could decide to adopt the report. For example, in the recent case of Russia traffic and transit, that dealt for the first time with national security exception. That was not appealed. In the EC poultry meat China, which dealt with the certification requirements, that was not appealed. And in a recent case brought by the US against China in respect of domestic support to agriculture, that was not appealed by China. So there is that part of the positive aspect. But the negative is, as Jennifer said, not in the interests in general of countries like New Zealand, because of the potential for it to weaken the dispute settlement system and erode the gains that we as a small country have achieved through the dispute settlement system. So to avoid this, countries are working on reform, and there's various options put on the table. Of course, Ambassador Walker is working on facilitation, and his report is to the General Counsel is due out tonight. So we will all read that with great interest. I won't talk about all the various reform things on the table because I'm hoping that Joe will address that. But my own view is that on the one hand I'm quite pessimistic, that I think that despite the strenuous efforts of Ambassador Walker, the current impasse is not going to be resolved quickly. But, and here's the optimistic side of me, I don't think we should despair. I think that we should remember that the panel system is fundamentally sound, and we should place trust in panels. And if we place trust in panels, then ultimately that would be the basis for a very strong system.